Okay, so those of you that have been looking at the videos on the Greenville Plan website, you'll notice that there already is a Child Find video on there. I don't remember when I did it, but it was probably almost a year ago, maybe, I don't remember. But I think this will replace it, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like I said earlier, my name is Erica Urban, and I'm with Child Find and Preschool Special Ed here with the school district, and I brought two of my staff here with me, Lisa McKinnon and Nancy Woodruff. They work in Child Find as well. Our offices are currently located here at CDS. I wanted to just tell you a little bit about what Child Find is and how you might be able to branch out the word to families that you think might need this support. Okay? So Child Find is a component, it's a mandate of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And you've probably heard of IDEA, that is our federal law that we work under. But the Child Find mandate requires us to locate, identify, and evaluate children who have disabilities that may be in need of special education services. So it kind of is great that we're tagging on to your training. That was wonderful. So we're looking for children ages 3 through 21 who attend public or private schools, who are homeschooled, who are wards of the state, homeless, incarcerated, whatever. We want to know, we want to help find those children that might be in need of special education services. And we actually start that search at ages 2 and a half. There. And IDEA, like I said earlier, is a federal mandate, and it's what we work under. So every child who is receiving special education services is identified as a child with a disability under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that there's a separate process between this disability and a medical diagnosis. And so we talk through that with families that come through this process. And this gives you a little bit more information about how IDEA governs, how states and agencies provide those services. So we have a law book. It's very thick and we don't have to. We usually look at it online, but there's lots of regulations. There's two different parts of IDEA. You have Part B, which is what we work under in the school district, and that's for children that school age, so starting at age 3. And you also have IDEA Part C, and that is our BabyNet program. And those children who are receiving early intervention services from birth that ends at age 3, those children transition, if the parents want, into the Child Find process to see if they are going to meet eligibility for a disability under IDEA Part B. Okay? And so the areas that we look at Child Find include academic readiness, which is what most people in the community think that's what we look for. But that's only one piece of what we look for, because we look at the whole child. So we're looking at their achievement ability, their cognitive ability. If they're younger children, we always look at that versus the academic readiness in terms of a 2 or 3-year-old. Communication, speech, and language. Hearing and vision, we do screening for all children that come through. Also, we look at their motor skills, and that's divided into 2 different areas. You look at fine motor, which is going to include the way that they use their fingers and small hand movements. We also look at gross motor, which is going to be the large muscle movements, jumping, running, walking, those kinds of things. Social, emotional, and behavioral skills. And then daily living skills, which is also referred to as independent functioning skills or adaptive living skills. You might hear it as that. And that's the ability to take care of their own needs. Okay? The way that you contact Child Find is by calling Nancy Woodruff. Her number is right here, 452-0093. We also have an intake form that we provide out to all agencies, such as BabyNet. We also we mail them to physicians' offices to make sure that if they want to send a referral to us, we can take that information as well, and then we schedule the appointments. So if a family member has a concern for their child and they're already attending a Greenville County school, they don't need to call Child Find, because the Child Find process that we have is for children that are not attending public school. So they're private school students, they're homeschool students, or they're underage, so they're not old enough to be in 4K or 5K yet. For children that are in school, we also do Child Find, but it's in a different format. It follows an intervention process, and if there are concerns, that is discussed at the school level, and sometimes it's referred to as the assistance team. So if a family comes to you and they have concerns about something with their child, if they're in school, in a public school in Greenville County, we direct them to contact their child's teacher. If they're not in school, we direct them to Child Find, okay? At Child Find, we have multiple members that work in this process. Starting off, we have educational diagnosticians who are trained in conducting screenings for children in the areas of cognition and motor, daily living, and social emotional development. We also have school psychologists, and they also may do screenings, but they also will do evaluations if it's warranted. Speech and language therapists are going to be at every appointment, particularly at the young age, because language is just developing for some of our children. Some of them don't have verbal language yet, but we still can assess their ability to receptively understand language, and then also working on what abilities they might have with their mouth and motor movements, anything that they might need. Other areas might include an occupational therapist, and those disciplines work on those fine or small motor movements. Also sensory needs for children, they'll look at that. A physical therapist is going to look at those gross motor movements. We also have evaluators when needed for visually impaired and hearing impaired children. So anything that's needed, they might not all be at the first appointment. They might be working in consultation, or they might be working and following up with the family. So just so you know that we can look at the whole child, and we have highly trained and skilled, qualified staff looking at those needs. For Child Find, because the needs of a 2.5-year-old is very different than the needs of a 7-year-old and so on, we conduct screenings in 2 different locations. So for our children that are 2.5 up through almost old enough to go to kindergarten, we conduct those in a play-based format at Greenview Child Development Center, and that is located on Old Piedmont Highway over by the main Greenville Hospital campus. That's where we do those screenings, and it's very child-centered, lots of toys, kitchen, play, balls, cars, trucks, anything that you can think of that a child's going to think is fun is in that room. Carpet, there's also a small table. So it's very age-appropriate for a preschool-age child. For our school-age children, they're conducted at one of our district facilities, M.T. Anderson Support Center, and that's on Blessing Road. It is the old Southside High School that's been renovated, and that's off of 85, down by Augusta Road. So my office handles all the screening calls for every child, so you only need to know that one number, and I'm going to give you each a flyer. Lisa, could you just make sure each one gets one of those? And I also have Spanish if you want one, just let me know, okay? That you can use and post and refer to it. But I will share that in just a minute up here on the board. So at that Child Find appointment, we tell families it lasts approximately 1 hour. And what we're doing is we are conducting an observation of the child in that play environment. We're also talking with the parent. The early interventionist, if the child's a Part C child, then early interventionist is very helpful in helping the parent articulate some of those concerns and also share what they have seen in private sessions with the child. We also gather before the child comes any evaluations they have. If they've been to Clarity, if they've been to developmental pediatrics or kinetics, any kind of evaluations they've had or services, we want that so we can really get to understand the whole child and get to know some of the background. If they've received a whole bunch of services, we might even be able to see the progress they've made, and that helps us kind of get a better picture of a child globally. We also review any other data that the parent has and provides at the time of the appointments. We conduct screenings, and sometimes we go ahead and do some evaluations if the parent provides consent and the team feels it's necessary at that time to get started. We also participate in a BabyNet transition conference, and that is for those children that are receiving Part C services that I mentioned earlier that are transitioning at age 2.5, if the parent wishes to do so. And then we might plan for a follow-up Child Find appointment if it's needed. And there are a couple different scenarios. And so some of the outcomes of that appointment might be that the team shares with the parent that their child is functioning at an age-appropriate range, and so there's no disability suspected. And that's awesome news for the family. But we don't say goodbye from there. We say, here's a packet of information, and we give parents resources that we've gathered from within the community that might be helpful for them to continue to help their child develop in some of those areas of development, including information from the library system, from Help Me Grow and Family Connection. We could let parents know about that as well. Sometimes children have to come back for a follow-up appointment because maybe we want to look closer and do an evaluation in this particular area of development. And so those appointment times would vary. Sometimes a child is suspected of having a disability, and right there at that appointment, the team has all the information they need because the parent has provided those reports, those evaluations from other agencies. It matches what we're looking at in front of us in terms of how that child is performing right then. The parent has no contradictory concerns based on that report, and everything looks like it's a match in terms of a good performance indicator of the child. We might decide that a disability is suspected and we don't need to do further evaluations. We want to go right ahead and schedule a meeting to talk about whether or not the child is eligible for special education. Okay? So that's another option. And then after all of that, if a child is evaluated, we would have another meeting, and that would be to discuss the evaluation results and to talk about whether or not the child meets eligibility criteria and whether or not they need special education services. Okay? Oops, I went too fast. So if a child is determined eligible for special education, then a draft individualized education program will be discussed at the meeting. And those of you in the special education world have probably heard of an IEP. It is a federal document, and it's written for every child who is eligible and receiving special education services. Okay, and it's reviewed at least once annually, but we certainly can review it as often as the parent or any of the providers feel is necessary. It includes all the services and supports that the child needs, including their present levels and evaluation information, mastery criteria, anything that the team needs to know in order to provide the necessary services for each child on an individual basis. Last year, we conducted 989 child find screenings. That's a lot of children that we've touched, but it's never enough. There's always others out there. I know there is. We conducted 851 preschool age child find screenings. And the way we do our data is July 1 to June 30th. So that's through just this past June. And 138 of those children were school age screenings. So ladies are busy. Yes, they're busy. So, but we know there's more children out there. And so once a year, we do what we call a mass bulk mail out. And we send that brochure that you're looking at out to, this year we sent it to 1,608 different addresses. And it goes out to physicians' offices, attorneys, realtors, churches, daycares, dentists, anywhere that we think somebody might touch a family of a child who they might suspect might have a disability. So they can post it and families can get that information as quick as possible, because the sooner we can identify, the sooner we can serve. So that's the brochure that you all have gotten out there, and it kind of gives a little bit of a summary of what I shared with you today on there. And I also wanted to share with you, we do trainings at the preschool age level for families that are struggling with children's behavior. And this is in collaboration with Family Connection and with Greenville Hospital System, Department of Child Psychiatry, and Developmental Pediatrics. So we've developed a training on how to support parents to help their children deal with some of those struggling and challenging behaviors of temper tantrums and following directions, sitting quietly, paying attention, teaching parents how to positively engage with their child and develop a positive relationship. We had our first session of the year this past Tuesday. We provide a meal. The Greenville County has a food truck, and we have worked out where we pay for meals. So the families can come, they have a nice meal, they can bring their child, we have childcare, and we talk about strategies to help them with their child's behavior. We had 42 people last training session. There were 21 children and about 18 parents, give or take a few. Mira was there too, and it was a great environment. Parents really shared some of their concerns that they're having at home. We gave them some strategies to utilize in the home environment to help them. It was great to see those light bulbs going off and those connections made between different families. And the emotions families had when they realized that it's not them. We teach them and tell them don't take it personal. It's not personal. It is a form of communication, especially at this age. And so that was a very good outcome there. The other thing, see, I'm trying to do a bunch of different Greenwood County School things. The other session that we have is called Parent Academy. And this is for families of children that are newly identified as having a disability, or maybe they're new to Greenville and they want to know, what does this all mean? What is it? And so it's a much more intimate setting, smaller group, and we sit around the table and talk with the family. There is a PowerPoint to help guide the discussion, but we talk about things like, what was that whole process I just went through? Because it's all a blur to some of these families. All that stuff I shared with you about child find, that's a blur for a family when they go through the process. And so we can help talk to them about that whole process, explain to them their role in the IEP process so they can continue to advocate for their child. We teach them what the IEP means. We explain to them what their rights are as a parent and any questions they have. We want our families to be as informed as possible so they can be the best advocate for their child. Because special education is very complex. And there's not an easy answer for anything because it's so individualized. So I gave you a lot of information in a short amount of time. So I'm here for questions if anybody has any. Yes?
I'm curious, with the exception of BabyNet, have y'all ever tracked where most of your referrals come from? Is it physicians' offices or?
Well, I would say, and you guys jump in, the majority of ours come from the hospital system. Carolina Pediatrics is another big one that sends them in. Help Me Grow is another agency that we get lots of referrals from. We get them from a Child's Haven, from Head Start. So a lot of the community, but they're very common. I'm not seeing new ones pop up. And so if you know of a new one out there that deals with children that might be suspected of having a disability, particularly if they're homeschooled and they're not already in our school system, Child Find is the way to go because we can do those screenings and see if that child is identified, if they need to be identified. But yeah.
Does that include charter schools?
Mm-hmm.
Do you accompany parents to the IEP meeting?
Do I personally?
Or does Child Find accompany the parents?
Well, at the eligibility meeting, if the child is, when they're having a meeting to identify whether or not a child has a disability, there is, I'm not personally there, I mean, I am sometimes, but there's always representatives from the evaluation team as well as if the child needs services, then the service provider will be there as well. So the family gathers with the team at that time.
But will they be in the actual IEP meeting at the school?
Not the same people, because at the school, it's going to be the providers that are serving the child.
Okay, so
See?
because sometimes the parents are a bit overwhelmed by.
Right.
So I didn't know if Child Find gives somebody to hold their hand
Oh.
at the meeting.
It would be great if we could, but along the way, we have parents as partners. And so we want to make sure that a parent is supported. We do have advocates that come with families, but Child Find, our purpose and our mandate is to help identify those children. And then we reach out to other avenues to help parents support them through the process. And it could be through Parents as Partners program. It could be through the Autism Society. They have a lot of parents that help support children in parents and IEP meetings. It could be other advocates, but not through Child Find.
Yeah.
Yeah, or, yeah. So yeah, Child Find particularly, we're just there at the initial process step. So no. That's a good question. Yeah.
With, whenever you had the number of children who were evaluated or screenings, what percentage of those would you say were found to be eligible?
Well, I would tell you that of the children that we screened, approximately 65% last year were suspected of having a disability, and so they moved on for evaluations. And of the children that were evaluated, 85% were determined eligible last year.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Erica and Denise. I'm amazed at what you're doing and the collaboration that is happening with this group. It's amazing that, and the number of children that need the services to help them get them ahead with what they need to do in life. I commend you.
We always want to find more though, so if you know where to
There are
find
more.
them, tell us, because we'll add them to our mailing list. Yes, Robin?
If a child is in another state or another county and has an IEP, when they move to Greenville and want to continue going to public education,
Right.
do they call Child Find or they go to the school they're zoned for, and then if they need service, they need to continue, they come in with an IEP, what do they do?
So it depends on how old they are. If they're a preschool age child, they would contact my office, the preschool side of my office, not the Child Find side. And if they're school age, they would contact the school that they are zoned for. They wouldn't have to come through Child Find, no. And a part of that process, they would then do what's called a comparable services of that IEP. So that they can provide services, and if the child is out of state, they would still do the comparable services, but we would have to then talk about a process to determine whether or not they meet South Carolina eligibility. So that's another process, but it's not through Child Find, if they already have an IEP, because they've already been found.
Can you explain the referral process one more time? Earlier in your slides, you said that they would have to go to their teacher first.
If the child's in a school, in one of our schools, yes. So if a child's in one of the schools in the district and they have concerns about that, the first thing that a parent would do, we would recommend, is to talk with their child's teacher about those concerns. And then from there, they can talk with guidance counselor, administration, as they work through a process to help the child through there.
If the teacher is the one that has that concern, she has to make a referral, or?
If the teacher has the concern, then she would start working with the child, and then she might talk with the person in her building that kind of oversees that process in terms of the assistance group at the school. She wouldn't have to necessarily make a referral to anyone. She would just schedule a meeting if that was necessary at that time.
If it's a Greenville County school.
Right.
If it's a private school, then yes.
Then they would send a referral
They would
to
send a
Child
referral.
Find. Yeah.
Any more questions for Erica?
Yes.
If a child's about to turn 2.5 and they're already connected with BabyNet, is the BabyNet coordinator the one that would be making the referral?
Yes.
Okay.
The BabyNet coordinator sends that to us with the answer from the parent as to whether or not they are interested in transitioning to our